This podcast is brought to you by Dr. Kirk Elliott, PhD. In an uncertain economy, if you're looking for wealth management solutions and financial advice, go to kirkelliottphd.com and make an appointment today. Coming up, I'll spell out the importance of the money, the bribe money flowing to the Bidens going to Joe Biden's home address. Wow. I'll consider reports about how Dr. Fauci was recruited to change the CIA's position about the origins of COVID. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey joins me. We're going to talk about a major lawsuit on behalf of parents' rights. And I'll examine the demands of the striking auto workers and Joe Biden's role in egging them on. If you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
Needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
Each day before the podcast, Debbie and I think about what should this podcast be called. And I came up with the idea of, is he home? Is he home? Meaning, is Biden home? Now, I'm going to get to Biden in a moment, but before I do, I'll say a word about the Republican contenders debate that just occurred. In fact, we're going to talk about the debate. Debbie and I are tomorrow because we watched parts of it. We didn't watch the whole thing, but we watched some of it together. And Debbie's like, let's discuss it. It's kind of interesting for us to sound off of each other on it. So we're going to really get into it a little bit more tomorrow. But I wanted to make one observation that really struck me throughout this debate. And that is that there was almost no discussion at all of police state. And by police state, I don't mean the film police state. I mean of the idea of the police state. No mention really, or barely a mention of January 6th and the implications of that, political prisoners, the targeting of opponents, and Trump. Now, I realize Trump wasn't there, but nevertheless, the political criminal targeting of Trump, not just going after him on all these indictments aimed at trying to lock him up, but now also most recently trying to destroy his businesses on preposterous pretexts. All of this makes Trump the embodiment of what the police state is going after. And so regardless of what you think about, was Trump going to make a good president? Do you agree with his policies? It's undeniable that he is the primary target of the police state. And so when you don't recognize that and rally to his defense on that point, and at least on that point, then I say to myself, wait, I mean, you claim that you're going to dismantle the swamp and drain it and get rid of all these things and do all these things. You don't even seem to recognize what the police state is doing right now. So how can we be confident that you have any clue? If you don't even know what the problem clearly is, how are you going to be the solution to that problem? All right. The problem originates with Biden. He is the face of the police state. Now, he's a very odd face of the police state because in the title itself, when I mentioned a moment ago, is he home? You know, normally people who run police states are mentally at least at home. They're there. They know what they're doing. And they're not, bonkers. So they're not like ignorant of where they are, or they can usually tell you their middle name. But I actually mean the phrase, is Biden home, in a different way, not having to do with his cognitive faculties, but rather the following. Here's a statement by Representative James Comer, head of the Oversight Committee. I have obtained 2 bank wires revealing Hunter Biden received payments, this is from China, originating from Beijing in 2019 when Joe Biden was running for president. Joe Biden's Delaware home is listed as the beneficiary address for both money wires from China. So this is the point. The point is that when you send a wire, you designate the amount, you designate the bank, you designate who it's going to, and then there's a home address. what's the residential address to which this money is being sent? Because for security, you don't want money to be going to magical places. This went to a P.O. box over here. This went to, no, you got to say this went to this particular address on this street. And that street turns out to be Joe Biden's home address. Now, defenders of Joe Biden, and there's an attorney named Sams who said, wait a minute, this is no big deal. It was a time of COVID. Hunter Biden was, of course, living at home. He's living with Joe Biden, and if the money is going to Hunter Biden also lives there. Well, what's the big deal? The money isn't going to Joe Biden, it's going to Hunter Biden. Obviously, he's going to list his address, which happens to be the same, at least for the time, as Joe Biden's. The only problem with this line of defense is that it doesn't really work. Why? Because at the time, Hunter Biden was not living with Joe Biden. Hunter Biden was living in California. How do we know this? We know this because Hunter Biden himself tells us this. In his memoir, Hunter Biden goes into his life, what he was doing, where he was living, and he talks exactly about this time period, and he specifies that he was living in California. So in other words, the reason for listing Joe Biden's home address had nothing to do with Hunter Biden living at that address. He was living elsewhere, but sent the money to Joe Biden's home address. Now, there's a lot more developing on this front, and as this impeachment inquiry gets going further, there'll be a lot more to talk about. But I want to highlight one other item, and that is that a letter has now emerged that was written by Hunter Biden to the chief prosecutor in Ukraine. Remember, Joe Biden got the prosecutor named Shokin fired. And after he was fired, he was replaced by another guy named General Lutsenko. And what does Hunter Biden write to this guy? He basically goes, shut down the investigation right now. And the implied threat is that if you don't do that, my dad can get you fired. So this is how power is exercised. This is how the bribery operation works. The bribe was not simply to get Shokin fired. That's the first part of it. And the second part of it is, let's make sure that his replacement isn't another Shokin, doesn't continue the corruption inquiry into Burisma. So here's a line from Hunter Biden. Moreover, it is imperative that allegations of criminal activity made to the media about Burisma and or Nikolai Josensky, this is the guy who's the head of Burisma, come to an end. Hunter Biden, using the influence and name of Joe Biden, who has the administrative authority, just as he did with Shokin to get that guy fired, using his leverage to do the bidding of Burisma in exchange for all the money that was paid to the Biden family. Debbie and I are on a really good health journey, but we still struggle to eat enough fruits, veggies, and fiber, and you know what? That's mandatory. Now, lucky for us, we discovered Balance of Nature, and what better way to get all your fruits and veggies plus fiber than with Balance of Nature? Now, this is Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies in a capsule, so easy to take. Made from fresh whole produce. The produce is powdered after an advanced vacuum cold process, which stabilizes the maximum nutrient content. And this is Balance of Nature's Fiber and Spice, a proprietary blend of fiber and 12 spices for overall and digestive health. Join Debbie and me. Start your journey to better health right now. Call 800-246-8751 or go to balanceofnature.com. You'll get 35% off your first preferred order by using discount code America. Again, it's 800-246-8751 or go to balanceofnature.com. Get 35% off your first preferred order by using discount code America. How does the Biden regime work to manipulate the information that is made available publicly about any narrative? In this case, we're going to talk about the origins of COVID. How does a government do that? Let's remember that a government is made up of multiple agencies and parts. And these parts have a quasi-independence. They don't communicate with each other necessarily or coordinate with each other. So think, for example, you've got the CIA over here, or you got the FBI over there, the Defense Department, the State Department, you've got the White House, and the White House does have a sort of coordinating role, but nevertheless, these departments are large. A lot of times they have independent expertise. And so in the case of the origin of COVID, there are different groups looking into it. The energy department is looking into it with its experts. The FBI is looking into it. And so is the CIA. Now, it turns out that somewhat inconveniently, the Energy Department and the FBI both came to the conclusion that COVID was made in a lab. And the Biden regime and Fauci had been trying to go the other way and say that no, we have no idea where it came from. But to the degree that we know, it was COVID had a natural origin. And because Fauci had, maybe still has, this totemic status as sort of the nation's leading infectious disease expert, there were all these digital platforms, including YouTube, that treated Fauci like he was some kind of a messiah. And essentially, if Fauci said it, that was science. And if Fauci didn't say it or opposed it, that was anti-science, and they would then deplatform you or ban you for saying what Fauci didn't say or for advancing the theory that contradicted Fauci. But now we're beginning to learn the kind of shady operations that are going on behind the scenes. Fauci, for example, commissions a study, an academic study. He commissions it from scholars who get government money, so they have an incentive to come to the conclusion that he wants. So they do come to that conclusion, and he gives them more money. And then he cites that study in public as if he just independently stumbled upon it. Oh man, here's a study from a bunch of prominent virologists, not saying that A, he was behind it, he was involved with it, he read it beforehand, he approved it. So this is the sneakiness of Fauci. And there's a new twist on all this, which is apparently Fauci was ushered into the CIA, kind of in a backdoor way, to convince the skeptical CIA analysts who were looking into the origins of COVID. And Fauci was there to tell them, hey, listen, I'm Dr. Fauci, and I want to tell you that COVID had a natural origin. It didn't come from a lab. Now, Fauci, it seems, was not successful in being able to do this, but it's interesting that, again, the CIA is supposed to be making an independent assessment. What's going on with pulling in Fauci? It's not that the CIA lacks experts. It's not they don't have credentialed people. It's not like they're just a bunch of, spooks. And so let's bring in a real doctor who knows what's going on. It's nothing like that. The CIA has plenty of expertise. And the people who were on this panel had that kind of expertise, but evidently they were not falling into line. Therefore, bring in Fauci. So whistleblower testimony says the CIA rewarded these analysts, these 6 analysts, with financial incentives to change their COVID-19 origins conclusion. So first they try Fauci. That doesn't work. Okay, well, listen, money works. Let's give them money to change that. So you see the internal effort here to cajole, to pressure, perhaps even to bludgeon people into conformity. So it's not even really clear what's going on here. Was this Fauci's idea? Hey, listen, I want to go over to the CIA guys. I'll talk some sense into them. Is it that? Was it that there was one guy on the CIA and he was the lone guy who thought that COVID had a natural origin? All the other 6 guys went the other way. And so did he go, listen, let me round up Fauci. He's on my side of this. I'll bring him in and maybe he can convince all my colleagues that, with the weight of his authority, he can come in his white lab coat. Is that what was going on? Was this an operation directed by the Biden White House? They go, oh, wow, we had the Energy Department kind of go rogue on us on this, and we had the FBI go rogue on us. Christopher Wray, there he is before Congress saying that he thinks COVID was made in a lab. This is very embarrassing. And so let's at least get the CIA into line. Let's call up Fauci, bring him on. So there are different possibilities of how this happened, but it seems that it did happen. Fauci ends up in a very unlikely spot inside the CIA, trying to convince these CIA guys that they're wrong and that COVID has a natural origin. The motive, it seems, I think, on Fauci's part, not necessarily, Fauci's a Chinese agent. No, that's not really it. It's that Fauci had been involved in funding gain-of-function research in labs in the United States. Those labs were doing business with Wuhan and with China. And so Fauci realized we're in a global pandemic. Lots of people have died. The blame is now going to fall not just on China, but on gain-of-function research in the United States, funded by, guess who? One Dr. Fauci. And therefore, it's very good. It's very beneficial to cover up the origins of COVID. Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop with the MyPillow pillows. He also created the Giza Dream bed sheets. Now, we use these bed sheets. Debbie and I love them. The sheets look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for you, which is crucial for your overall health. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. It's ultra soft and breathable, but also extremely durable. And Mike's latest deal sale of the year for a limited time, 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets, marking prices down as low as $29.98, depending on the size. Go to mypillow.com and a promo code Dinesh. There you'll find not just this great offer, but deep discounts on all the MyPillow products, the MyPillow robes, the mattress topper, the pillows, of course, the towel sets, and so much more. The number to call, 800-876-0227. Again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. Make sure to use the promo code DINESH, Dinesh. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome back to the podcast a friend of ours, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey. By the way, you can follow him on Twitter at AG Andrew Bailey. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you again. I think the last time you were on, we were talking about censorship and we were talking about the case Missouri versus Biden. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, and now you're involved in a new battle involving schools and parents' rights. Talk a little bit about the lawsuit, and then let's get into the meat of it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, and thank you for covering this important story. We're fighting to protect a parent's rights to know what's going on in their kids' schools and have a voice in that process. What we have is a school board in Wentzville, Missouri, which is kind of on the fringe of the St. Louis metropolitan area, largely recently developed suburban neighborhoods. And the school board has unlawfully closed a meeting in order to adopt a transgender bathroom policy with this express intention of depriving parental access to and denying the parents an ability to have a say in the adoption of that policy. This violates the open meetings law. It violates the parents' rights. And so that's why we're going to keep fighting to ensure that the parents know what's going on in their schools and have a say in that process.
All right, let's go through this slowly. You got a school board, and they want evidently to have a transgender bathroom policy. Let's stop right there, because the concept, I mean, if we just go back 5 years ago, would be seen as kind of outlandish and preposterous. I mean, I understand that the gender issue kind of piggybacks on the race issue, but people also understand that while racial differences are sort of, you may say, skin deep, there are real differences between boys and girls, and there are good reasons for having separate bathrooms, good reasons for why, you have boys and girls playing in separate tennis matches, and so on. So how does a school board get radicalized to the point where a majority of them think, A, it's good to have transgender bathrooms, and B, let's kind of keep the parents out of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the problem. The whole purpose behind the open meetings law in this regard is so that parents can understand what's going on and have a say in the process to ensure that the policies adopted by the board are consistent with the parents' values and ensure the safety of the children. I mean, imagine if you're a 10-year-old girl and you go into a restroom and there's a grown man or a boy that's using the stall next to you. I mean, there are safety concerns. And I think those safety concerns have played out in another context. Look at what happened in Loudoun County, Virginia. And what we learned from that is when parents have a voice in the process, real change can happen. But there were kids that were not being protected by an ill-conceived transgender bathroom policy in Loudoun County, Virginia. And it resulted in significant problems. And that school district ultimately changed from the very top of state government across the district level. And so we've got to continue to fight to ensure the parents have a say in the process. When we're dealing with issues of human sexuality, these are sensitive issues. And how the school is exposing the children to those issues absolutely requires parental consent.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what puzzles me is the way in which the school boards kind of develop this agenda now, because it seems to me like, where do they get it from? Are they just getting it from the educational indoctrination that is pervasive in academia? Is it that these guys, because I'm assuming that it's normal parents who run for the school board, right? And so at some point they've got to sort of go, yeah, this is the way for us to go. And where do you think this radicalization comes from?
Well, at least in part, I think the problem here is the superintendent. The evidence that we have is that the superintendent in this instance was already letting a boy use a female restroom and said to the board, well, it's okay. The girls already accept him as one of them. Well, how does she know that's true? 100% of the girls at that school are okay with this? And you didn't tell the parents or the school board, you just went ahead and made a decision and then present it to the board as a fait accompli? And there's deeper problems here. The superintendent and the attorney presented the board with the proposed policy 30 minutes before the meeting and then demanded that they expeditiously adopt it. That's not enough time for the board members to review the policy and understand the implications. And certainly that discussion needs to be had in open so that the parents can understand what's going on as well. And our understanding is that the most recent board meeting, there was ample confusion from both parents, administrators, and students about who's using what restrooms. And again, that confusion is directly attributable to the fact that they're holding the meetings in closed session and not allowing access by parents who need to know what's going on.
Okay, so now I think you're making a key administrative point, and I saw this at the college level where you got a board of trustees and they're in charge nominally, but they're all decentralized. They show up on campus 3 or 4 times a year. Really, the administration cooks the agenda and goes, hey, this is what we want, pass this, and then they defer to the expertise of the administration because the administration is on campus. They assume that they have a certain administrative authority. So I think that seems to be what's going on here. The superintendent, as you say, is the one who is commandeering this process.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, we see that kind of deep state swamp problem across government. It's certainly true at the local level in school boards. And luckily here we had school board members that recognized there was a problem and registered their objections as far back as June in multiple meetings, opined that, hey, look, these meetings need to be open and transparent so the parents can have buy-in and a say in the process if we're going to go down this road. And my concern is that the board meetings don't necessarily accurately reflect the evidence that we have that these objections were made. In other words, the board didn't note the objections in the minutes in order to paper over the problem. Luckily, these board members that have come forward had the bravery and courage to come forward and say, look, this is a significant harm to our children. It's a significant harm to parents' rights. And that's why we're fighting so hard. We're going to enforce the state's open meetings law and ensure that the kids are safe and the parents have a say in the process so the policies that are adopted are consistent with the parents' values.
We'll be right back with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. You can follow him on Twitter, on X, at AG Andrew Bailey. Be right back. If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your remedy. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago, and what a difference we've seen in our joints. Just nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. Now, Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. More than 1 million people have tried Relief Factor. About 70% have gone on to order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do exercises that for several years she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a huge game changer for her aunt, other members of our family, Mike, here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again to call, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. I'm back with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. We're talking about parents' rights in schools and school boards. What exactly is the policy at issue here? What does the policy state, and what is the basis for the challenge of this policy and procedure?
Well, first and foremost, we have a limited glimpse into the contents and substance of the policy because it has been shrouded in mystery, and the board has, to my knowledge, at the present time, not made it public yet. Again, they're going to present it at a later date as a fait accompli, and it's already in effect now, according to the superintendent, the evidence that we have. But what little we know from the evidence that some of the board members, the dissenting board members, have provided to us, is that the policy specifically allowed for children to use the opposite sex bathroom and the parent of the child never know. So 2 layers of problems here. Number one, parents were boxed out of the process of adoption of the policy. So none of the parents in the school district know what's going on or have had any say in what policy was adopted. But number two, the policy that apparently has been adopted allows kids to use a bathroom of the opposite gender and that own child's parents not know. So in other words, if my daughter decided she wanted to use the boys' restroom, the school wasn't going to notify me. That's a huge problem. Again, we've seen civil liability crop up in other instances in other jurisdictions where schools have basically funneled children towards transgender ideology, which is inconsistent with parent values. And the parents have filed civil suit and received large judgments against the school district. So this is bad policy.
I mean, it's also the secrecy of it. Seems to me the school is aware that the parents are likely not going to be okay with this. Because think about it, if they had a marvelous rationale, they would be like, hey, parents, you're welcome to the process. What we're doing makes absolute sense. It's actually good for your children, but they don't think they can make that case. And that's why they feel like, let's keep these people, let's not let them be in the know.
Well, in reference to the policy in particular, some of the board members at least said, hey, we can't let the parents know about this. We'll get sued. And then in relation to the closure of the meeting that adopted the policy, at least one board member said it's none of the parents' darn business. So, I mean, that the express intent here is to shroud both the substance of the policy and the process by which the policy is adopted in secrecy to avoid any kind of parental intervention.
You mentioned what's the basis for the challenge to what the school board is doing? You mentioned, I think, the open meetings law. Is that the main basis of the challenge? And what does that law say?
Well, the law says that meetings have to be open unless there's an express provision in statute as a basis for closure. And what we have here is the board kind of saying, well, there's an attorney present, so it's attorney-client privilege. And yet what was going on is that there was a vote being taken, or at least supposed to be taken, on adoption of a district-wide policy. And the evidence we have is that there was no discussion with the attorney about the substance of the policy. So you don't just get to bring an attorney into the room and then close a meeting. That's not how that works. And certainly the board members, the dissenting board members recognized that and understood that, tried to lodge their complaints. Those complaints were then not registered on the minutes or not annotated in the minutes of the previous board meetings. And it appears the policy's already been adopted as a fait accompli without an open vote on it.
So what happens now? You file a claim against the school board, and is this heard now in state court? What's the next step legally?
Yeah, we're in state court in St. Charles County, Missouri, and we demand that the board start the process over and include the parents. We've got to respect parents' rights. The board has to respect parents' rights and ensure that the policies adopted are consistent with parental values and that there's transparency and ensure the safety of the children. And I'm not sure that's happening now. So they need to start over. Get rid of the policy that's in effect that was adopted behind closed doors, have an open meeting where the policy can be vetted thoroughly by the parents and the parents can have a say in the process. I think there also needs to be a financial sanction leveled against the school district because the school has to understand that this is unacceptable and they can't go back to this in the future. When this kind of thing happens, typically the school board has kind of two choices. One is that they can go, oops, this is probably not the right way we went about this, so let's reconsider and start again. Or they can dig in and they can go, all right, we're in for a battle. We want to become the national heroes of transgender rights. We want to have all these groups that praise us because we're taking a strong stand. Which way do you think this particular school board is going to go? Are they going to back off or are they going to charge forward? Well, it remains to be seen. Certainly, we're fighting that they back off. That's the right answer in the sense that they need to back off. They need to open their meetings and ensure that the parents have a say in the process. And until that happens, we're going to continue to push forward. And I also say that if this is happening in Wentzville, Missouri, then it's likely happening in other places across the state and across the nation. And at least for the people of the state of Missouri, I would encourage them to go to our website and register their complaints. The Attorney General's office has authority to file suit to ensure that public meetings are open and transparent, and we will do so to protect parental rights, as we've done in this instance and as we will do in other instances. I mean, I just want to commend you because, we're facing so many threats to basic rights and liberties around the country. And there are a lot of Republican attorneys general, but a lot of them seem to be, they're not quite as proactive in saying, listen, let's get ahead of this. We might be able to stop this, kind of block it before it kind of is fully consolidated. And so I am glad that you are fighting on so many different fronts to protect the core values of federalism, decentralization of power, in this case, parents' rights, and of course, the very important case in fighting the censorship of the Biden regime. So Andrew Bailey, thank you very much once again for joining me. Thank you so much for having me on. Always appreciate my time with you.
Vladimir Putin called the US dollar's drop in dominance objective and irreversible as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa formally agreed to use local currencies in trade instead of the US dollar. It's the first shoe to fall. As demand for the dollar weakens, the buying power of the dollar weakens. That's why Birch Gold Group is busier than ever. Investors and savers like me are looking to harness the power of physical gold held in a tax-sheltered IRA. Debbie and I buy gold from Birch Gold. We trust Birch Gold to help us diversify and protect our savings. Text Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. No obligation, just information with thousands of happy customers, an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews. You can count on Birch Gold to help you navigate transitioning an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. As the US dollar continues to get pressure from foreign countries, digital currency, central banks, arm yourself with information on how to protect your savings. Text Dinesh to 989898. Claim your free information kit now. I want to talk about the United Auto Workers strike against the major automobile companies. Joe Biden took part in the strike. A little bit of an unusual scene. You've got a president of the United States who is on the picket line. And I'm looking at a picture of Biden. He's got a bullhorn. He's got a kind of a UAW type of cap. So he's trying to create a sense that he's a working class guy. He's fighting for the rights of the working class. And his statement was, record corporate profits should mean record contracts. It's time American auto workers got a fair deal. Now, first of all, what is a fair deal? Deals are negotiated between companies and workers, and the workers can negotiate individually or they can join a union and negotiate collectively. What's really happened with unions, and the reason unions have now become almost an extension, or union leadership has become an extension of the state, is that they rely on the Democrats in government to come and bludgeon the corporation during the negotiation and make the corporation buckle down and pay up what the union is demanding. So this is not real negotiation. It's an exercise of raw power with the government providing, in a sense, the fist that enables the union to get what it otherwise might not have been able to get. So the kind of romantic theory of unions, which is that workers need to be able to pool their resources and their power, sit down across the table, be treated as legitimate stakeholders, come up to reasonable settlements that enable the company to continue to be successful and make a profit, and the workers to be treated appropriately. All of this is out the window once the federal government gets involved. I mean, imagine having you're an executive for a car company, and there's the president of the United States on the picket line as if he's some sort of an auto worker himself. This is the way in which the sort of original philosophy of unions has now become twisted with the intervention of the state. Now, it's not that Biden was some great, it's not that he spent all day out in the sun. He's not going to do that. He spent 12 minutes at the UAW picket line, 1 hour in Michigan. Then he was on a plane to California for a high-level ritzy fundraiser. So this is how the Democrats do it. They round up the media. They show up there for a few minutes, take some photos. The whole idea is symbolism. What does Biden get out of it? This idea that Biden is rolling up his sleeves. He's sort of on the picket line, and he's the president of the working class. Now, Trump, of course, was also in Michigan. In fact, he was in Michigan in a sense, while the other Republican candidates were debating. Trump is like, I'm gonna give a talk to the auto workers. And Trump's talk was very interesting because he was making a point that gets completely lost in very often when you talk about these kinds of topics, and that is that the auto industry itself is being destroyed by lack of competitiveness. And this is not really something new. It's not something where we're learning now in 2023 that a whole industry can be brought to its knees. Why? We have already learned this before, and we haven't learned this before. We've learned it before with steel, and we've learned it before with other industries, but we've learned it before with the auto industry. if we just flash back some decades, we see that Detroit was one of the great cities of America. It was flourishing. It had the kind of wealth that, in fact, made even New York City begin to envy what was happening in Detroit. Beautiful homes, beautiful avenues, tree-lined streets, and so on. Detroit was actually a safe and prosperous place. Why? Because it was essentially, that wealth was built by the auto industry. And then what you had is people like Michael Moore's dad. This is actually the amusement of Michael Moore's first film, Roger and Me. It's all about like, oh, General Motors is closing down the plant and my dad is going to be out of a job. Never bothering to ask, isn't it the case that your dad was one of the guys, along with many others, who are pushing for Detroit to pay more and give more benefits and give more healthcare and give more this and give more that, and then suddenly it's cheaper to make cars, not just in Japan or not just in other countries, but in South Carolina and other states that don't have the same kind of rules and regulations. So you have a combination of government regulations, in this case at the state level, and then you also have these demands on the part of these kind of unions which muscle their way. Either you give in or we're not even going to show up for work. And so the car companies do give in. But then what do? They raise prices, and suddenly nobody wants to buy these cars. They're not really worth the money. So we saw look at Detroit today. We're living with the debris of the collapse of the auto industry. And this is a lesson, evidently, that doesn't get learned, so they keep doing it. They act as if the real obstacle to higher wages are these corporate executives. They just don't want to pay us our fair share. That's not the problem. The problem is that in a competitive economy, you got to make products that cost a reasonable price that people are willing to pay. And so Trump's point is that the interests of the working class are not with the Democrats, but they're with preserving these industries in the first place so they can continue to provide jobs and opportunity. Guys, with my new movie coming up next month, I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. That's going to be one of the platforms on which the movie will play. And I post a lot of exclusive content on Locals, content that's censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. I do a live weekly Q&A every Tuesday, and no topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some cool films to Locals, documentaries, feature films, my films, filmed by other independent producers, and of course the big film coming up next month, Police State. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on Locals. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch all this content for free. It's also free to check out the channel, dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. Yesterday, I talked briefly about the New York judge who has said that Trump overvalued his properties, including, as it turns out, Mar-a-Lago, and that Trump has inflated the values of his properties in order to get loans. And the judge relied on an appraisal that set the value of Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. Here's my favorite response to that. This is by Chaya Raichik, whom I've had on the podcast before. She's the creator of Libs of TikTok. She's describing the surreal world we live in. She goes, Hunter Biden's paintings are worth $500,000 apiece. And a 20-acre property in Palm Beach is worth $18 million. She goes, therefore, logically, 36 Hunter Biden paintings, think of it, at $500,000 each, that's $18 million, can buy Mar-a-Lago. Now, this is intended to show the reductio ad absurdum of this kind of reasoning. Hunter Biden's paintings are not worth $500,000. They're not even worth $100,000. I'm not even sure they're worth $5. But they are, of course, worth a lot if you're somebody who's trying to bribe the Biden family. Oh, I think I'll buy a Hunter Biden painting. And oh, what a lovely painting. By the way, when you see your dad, just let him know that I'm looking for a tax advantage over here, but he doesn't have to do it. But by the way, great painting. This is how this stuff kind of works. Now, turning to Mar-a-Lago, the New York Post did something very simple, and that is they called up a bunch of Florida real estate people. What's Mar-a-Lago worth? And they got a bunch of responses. And one guy goes, this madness from this judge, he says, has sent shockwaves through the real estate circles of Florida. He goes, it is utterly delusional to value that property at $18 million. He goes, if I were listing that property on the market today, he goes, I would list it at around $300 million minimum. And he goes, not to mention that there is a separate golf course that is just minutes away. So the property is adjoining the golf course and gets added value, of course, from that. The real estate guy also says, let's look at some comps. He goes, right down the street, there's a 2-acre wooded lot at 1980 South Ocean Boulevard, 5 minutes from Mar-a-Lago. It lists for $150 million. And Mar-a-Lago, which is at 1100 South Ocean Boulevard, is 10 times bigger than that property. And also has a commercial business with revenue because there are 500 members who are part of the Mar-a-Lago Golf Club. Also really nearby, a 2.3-acre plot of land, 1063 Ocean Boulevard, on the market right now for $200 million. So this gives you an idea of what these properties are worth. And this is, in fact, the way that they are valued, by looking at comparable properties. And if a property that is smaller than yours and not as desirable as yours is worth $200 million, well, you can only guess that Mar-a-Lago is going to be worth considerably more. It talks about the fact that even residential properties that are less than half the size of Mar-a-Lago and are not on oceanfront are listing for around $40 million. So $40 million, 3 times what the judge valued Mar-a-Lago as. So it's very clear here that it's not Trump who's overvaluing the property. It's the judge who is grossly undervaluing the property so he can then claim that Trump has inflated his assets. So this is really a very corrupt judge. In fact, a judge that should, this is just a naked abuse of power by this guy. Some other simple facts about Mar-a-Lago: it's a national historical landmark. Right there, that creates added cachet, if you will. You want to buy a house. Oh, guess what? This house is an historical building. Oh, wow. That's obviously a plus. It was acquired by Trump in 1985. It has 126 rooms. Wow, honey, I didn't know that myself. We've been in about 10 of them, but I didn't realize that there were so many other rooms with more than 62,000 square feet. That's the size of the property. Wow, that's more than twice the size of our house. Oops. Debbie's like, yeah, right. You wish, Dinesh. Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out to get everybody like, wait, what? Did Dinesh and Debbie live in a, 32,000 square foot house? No, we don't. The Mar-a-Lago means sea to lake. Mar, I guess, is ocean, right? And Lago is lake. And there's that beautiful lake right in front of Mar-a-Lago, which just creates a wonderfully scenic backdrop. The roofing tiles and marble floor came from a Cuban castle. The house also has more than its fair share of bedrooms. Guess how many bedrooms in Mar-a-Lago?
30?
58. 58 bedrooms, 12 fireplaces. And so, suffice to say,
love to look at all the chandeliers, and we like to get
the architecture of Mar-a-Lago is very cool because it is European, but it's also European/Moorish. There was, in fact, I think the last time we did the premiere for 2000 Mules, there was a woman who was an architect or a decorator, and she was like, "Yeah, no, this is a Moorish style sort of palace." And you have that palatial feel when you're in Mar-a-Lago, and yet it's very elegant. It's not over the top. It is a little over the top. Yeah, but we like over the top. It's over the top. Well, I mean, the Palace of Versailles is over the top, but it's over the top spectacular. It's over the top great. Mar-a-Lago is one of the greatest properties in the United States, and this judge, who it's not that he's delusional. He actually knows. He's not delusional. He's corrupt. I'm now in the second section of Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. Chapter is called The History of Our Sewage Disposal System. The sewage that's being referenced here is human beings, unwanted human beings that the socialist regime wants to dispose of. And the way to do it In sewage, you just dump it, or you bury it, or you pour it into the ocean. But in this particular case, human sewage goes into the prison system, collectively known as the Gulag. Here is Solzhenitsyn. It's well known that any organ withers away if it is not used. Therefore, we know that the Soviet security organs have not died off, even to the extent of one single tentacle, but instead have grown new ones and strengthened their muscles. It's easy to deduce that they have had constant exercise. So here's a terrific analogy. Just as a human limb will atrophy if it's not used, Solzhenitsyn goes, this is true of the police state. The police state has to constantly arrest people, beat them up, lock them up, kind of flex its muscles, and it's been doing that. Now, it's significant that he says it has not died off, and it's important for Solzhenitsyn to say that because what he's trying to get at is that even after Khrushchev displaces Stalin and criticizes Stalin, even after the so-called thawing of the Khrushchev regime, Solzhenitsyn's point is the Gulag hasn't gone away. The Gulag may have changed in form somewhat, but it's still fully operational. It's had a lot of exercise over the years and over the decades. And then in the kind of florid style that Solzhenitsyn is famous for, through the sewer pipes the flow pulsed. Sometimes the pressure was higher than projected, sometimes lower. But the prison sewers were never empty. The blood, the sweat, the urine into which we were pulped pulsed through them continuously. This image of human waste here is just very deliberate because that's how the police state looks at citizens. They are, in a sense, SHIT. They are to be disposed of. They are garbage. Solzhenitsyn doesn't want people to lose sight of this. The history of the sewage system is a history of an endless swallow and flow, flood alternating with ebb and ebb with flood, waves pouring in, some big, some small, brooks and rivulets flowing in from all sides, trickles oozing in through gutters, and then just plain individually scooped up droplets. So the analogy here is that sometimes they go after just one guy. He's a droplet. But many of the time, it's not one guy. It's like, that village has been causing problems for us. Let's round up everybody in the village. Or this particular group, Russian Orthodox believers, are a problem. Let's start doing surveillance and mass arrests in that group. Let's round up some of the patriarchs and call them in. So this is done individually in some cases, but also collectively in others. And then Solzhenitsyn, in the manner of an anthropologist who is sort of studying this phenomenon called the Gulag, goes into, you can call it the problem of classification. He goes, in considering now the period from 1918 to 1920, we are in difficulties. And this is Solzhenitsyn is putting on an air of false pomposity. He knows what he's doing. He's pretending like, well, when we're trying to classify all these people, we have some problems, some classification problems. Should we classify among the prison waves all those who were done in before they even got to prison cells? Wow. He's like, look, we're counting prisoners here, but guess what? What if they round up a bunch of guys and shoot them before they even take them to prison? Should we count them? Should we not count them? This is a very interesting academic question. And then he goes on. And in what classification should we put those from the committees of the poor took behind the wing of the village Soviet or to the rear of the courtyard and finished off right there? So there are people that the local Soviet, the local collectivist organ of the state, grabs a hold of some guys, but it's too much trouble to take them in for questioning or haul them in for arrest. You just take them behind a barn and chop their heads off or shoot them. Solzhenitsyn goes, should we count those people? Are they also part of the Gulag prison inventory? Yes or no? And then he goes, and what about all the people from the famous rebellions? And this is about Solzhenitsyn makes references that you and I are probably going to be like, what's he talking about? He goes, Yaroslavl, Murom, Rybinsk, Arazamas. So these are evidently rebellions that occurred in the early days of the Soviet Union. These are Russian people who go, we don't want communism. And he goes, and for instance, the Kolpino executions of June 1918. What were they? Who were they? And where should they be classified? So it turns out that it's not just we, you and I in the United States, who don't know what these things are. Even Solzhenitsyn doesn't know. He knows, we know that there were these rebellions. They have names, Yaroslav, Murom, Rabinsk, Arzamas. We know that there were some executions in Kolpino. But he goes, who these people were exactly, what they were protesting, what kind of grievances did they have, what was their ethnic group, what was their religious affiliation, why was the regime targeting them? He goes, and a lot of times these things aren't known, and so you don't know, was this part of the Gulag itself? Was this really something else? How should it be classified?
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.